From the Ground Up. This is a Grit Daily sponsored podcast show where we talk to entrepreneurs and other leaders about the companies that they're working with and the stuff that they're doing to help the world and to provide just sort of some general information and help for people out there who want to know about issues that are going on today. Like AI is what we're going to be talking about today. And I am joined by Jenna Chamra. She's the Chief Customer Officer of Provoke and a co-founder of Novia. That's one of their newest inventions. So, hi, Jenna. How are you doing today?
Good. Doing great.
Good to have you. Tell us all about yourself and the company and what you guys are doing in the world.
Sure. So I actually started my career agency as a designer. Over the past 20 years, I fell in love with digital strategy and user experience, worked with both small startups and enterprises across a variety of industries. In the end, I guess what, I'm on a mission to right now is, as a designer and digital strategist, you have all these great ideas, right? And you get to take them from PowerPoint to prototype and out to your end users, but getting those actual ideas built and live and in the hands of your users is really hard. Over the past probably 10 years, been on a mission to really figure out how do you crack that nut, right? How do you really making sure that how do you actually make sure that what you're actually intending and that vision gets in the hands of your end users? And it's a lot harder than you think. About 3 years ago, I joined Provoke. Provoke is an overall services company really dedicated to helping our clients build digital products to help them win, right? I think that the one thing that if you work with enterprise clients and the one thing that they really struggle with is all the technical debt and everything that has kind of piled up year over year. And we really talk about how can a startup disrupt? For years I think we've said, oh, if we work more agile, if we have a product mindset, then we'll be able to work and release like startups. And that's kind of true, right? It did help us in a lot of ways be able to think and kind of work together more collaboratively, product and startup companies. But in the end, the true problem still remains that technical debt is still there, and it still really makes it hard for us to push really new, innovating, cutting edge products into the market. And that's the problem that Provoke is really now attacking with our Gen AI platform called Nova. And it really is about leveraging what we're calling digital coworkers to then take down all that mundane, tedious kind of maintenance work that is needed to be done to, maintain those and modernize those legacy systems, but allow, our really powerful, talented teams to focus on delivering new functions and features to the market.
Got it. Any what would be an example of one of these things, these legacy things that just one of them that Nova is helping to, take care of for teams?
Yeah. So I think, a simple use case that is, when you're running even just a standard web application, that's typically running on a React or some front-end development framework, where over time that React framework needs to be upgraded. Well, as you're trying to push new features and functions, somebody has to go in and update that to make sure that you're building on top of the latest and greatest. Well, when you come to a sprint demo, how do you tell a business owner that actually we need a month to upgrade React versus building your new features and functions, right? Nobody wants to hear that, right? Nobody wants to hear, oh, I had to go fix something technical in the background that, doesn't really add from a business owner's perspective, doesn't really add business value, but has to be done if we're going to create something that's reliable and scalable and in the future can sustain. But like for a business person and an experienced person, I'm like, seriously? Right? And so it's about how do you let AI start to do some of that for us so that, our developers and our teams can actually work on the new features and functions. And in the end, how can we get products released to customers in, weeks and months instead of months and years, right? And that's, kind of the scenario we're in right now is that for most customers, getting past MVP doesn't happen. Right. And so how do you leverage this technology to help them make their budgets and teams go further and really help them drive further along in their product roadmaps?
All right, so we're talking about AI and generative AI and tools related to that, and
Yep.
so that's yeah, we have a lot of things we can talk about related to that. And so, one of the questions that I have for you is, how does AI, with all of its potential to shift focus from repetitive tasks to more strategic and creative work, as a catalyst to enhance human potential?
Yeah, so I think when we all look at our days, I think there's a whole bunch of mundane tasks that we don't love doing but have to be done, right? They have to be done to maintain the business, keep the business going. But in the end, they're kind of tasks that really anybody could do, but we all have them on our plates. For a developer, that's about 42% of their workload daily goes to those kind of mundane, repetitive tasks that need to be done, right? But aren't necessarily high value and aren't necessarily things we love. For me personally, like when do I get to be creative and really good, do some complex problem solving? It's like maybe I get an hour or two a day, right, where I can carve out and really, have that ability to think and think about a bigger vision. And that's really our goal. There's so many mundane, repetitive tasks that AI is really good at doing, and that's where we really see AI coming into place, is that if we can really rethink our roles in terms of what are those things, right? And how do we leverage AI to do that? And how do you free us up to really conquer the more complex, creative problems, the ones that require more empathy, right? And leverage that all to become, this kind of superpower. But what we're seeing is that the industry is kind of falling back on co-pilots to do this. And co-pilots are great as a way of like getting yourself kind of familiar and comfortable with the technology, because they do add, do great things like taking meeting notes, etc. But co-pilots aren't really pushing it enough, right? Because you're kind of asking yourself to change human behavior, right? You're asking yourself to remember to use a co-pilot. You're asking yourself, how should I prompt this? What's the way to get the best output of the co-pilot, etc. Which, I think, we see just getting people to leverage and adopt it is hard, but then even getting them to continue use is harder. So how we think about it is, don't try to change the way that we work. Don't try to change our processes. Literally just give yourself another digital coworker that you can say, hey, I have this huge task list. Go take it down for me. Right. And in the end, is a coworker going to do everything perfectly, that digital coworker? No, they're not. Right. But if they can complete 6 out of 10 tasks for you in 3 minutes versus 3 days, like what lift is that, right? And if they can get us tasks about 60% of the way there, and then I just had to pick it up, like that's a huge savings too, right? And so when we think about the world, we're really on a mission to drive out all the mundane work out of our workload each and every day, so that we can focus on what we really love. And I think one of the our CEO Andy, I think really stated it well. It's time to bring the joy back to what we do each and every day. And I think so often we get plagued by so much stuff that just doesn't really bring us joy. And the AI is actually really good at. So it's time to leverage that as one of our superpowers.
Yeah. So you're talking about things like machine learning and obviously generative AI,
Yep.
and they are really leading to, well, your goal is to continue to lead to increased productivity within teams. Um, but maybe we should just get right down to, something that a lot of people are thinking about, which is what jobs are going to be affected. So which job roles do you think, or are you seeing, that are most at risk of being replaced by AI? Obviously, as you're talking about this a little, go a little
Yep.
bit more deeper here. And why is it crucial for employees in these roles to proactively engage in upskilling and reskilling efforts to adapt to these changes?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know that we're going to see I mean, especially in the use cases of software development, but in a lot of roles, I don't know that we're going to see, job roles completely go away, right? What I do think we're going to see is job roles change, right, to be towards higher value, tasks that, really humans are needed to do. But in the end, who's going to be affected most by AI and this technology? It's people who kind of live and are okay with being mediocre. Like if you're kind of here to clock in and clock out and okay with pushing the same button each and every day, and you don't have any desire or passion to learn, to make sure you're adding business to adding value to business every day and to get to the next level, yeah, there, this technology definitely can be a threat. But what we're seeing is, a lot of people are threatened by this technology. A lot of people are asking the same questions. Whose roles are going to be affected? Is my role going to be affected? I was actually super proud of our teams, when we initially did a hackathon about 2 years ago, when they were basically had AI doing their job, right? Because why was that so powerful? Because they knew their role needed to evolve, and they knew by learning about how this technology could help support them in their role that they would become more valuable for the future, right? So I think the key thing that I'm seeing is that, like, so many people are being like, oh no, we don't want that, we don't want that. And they actually feel like they're protecting their teams by, saying, no, AI can't replace us, and we're too special, et cetera. But in the end, the biggest threat to your team is not teaching them how to leverage the technology, right? Because that's how you go become invaluable in the future and really differentiated in the future. Sitting here saying that it's never going to happen, or that, they're not a threat to us, or just being scared, right? You're actually kind of really hurting your team, right? Because it's time to evolve. Just like when we made, the shifts, we've all seen this through the layers of technology, right? Even just how we've evolved from everything we used to believe had to be done on a desktop computer. And we said, no way are people going to do that all on their phones. What happened? Everybody does everything on their phone, right? And so it is this evolution. And I think the really critical point is, how do you start enabling your team to becoming comfortable in this new era? Because that's how you're going to keep them invaluable to your company and your business.
Yeah, so you're talking basically about upskilling and reskilling right there. And so, AI is going to be challenging workplace complacency. I think you're
Yeah.
talking a bit about that right now. And, what impact will all of this have on team dynamics and overall organizational performance, right? So, like, how is this what is a company going to be looking like because of the greater upskilling and the greater adoption and embracing of AI?
Yeah, I think there's two kind of camps here, right? I think there's the camp of some companies who see this as a cost cutting measure, right? And they're able to slim down teams and bring in this technology to kind of fill in those gaps, and they'll be okay for a little bit, right? But then I think there's companies who will actually see this as a way to really differentiate themselves, being that they take it, they leverage AI to take off that burden off their most talented human individuals and allow them to become really high performer power teams that help them differentiate their brand. Because when you think about just all the brand experiences that we have today, right, this has the ability to really supercharge your roadmap. So this technology has the ability to deliver things that would used to take us years in months, right? But you still have to keep investing in your human talent and those high performing teams, and just let AI do the rest. And that's how you're going to get really far ahead. And it's also about, how do you leverage freeing up humans from those mundane tasks to actually have empathy with your end users, right? And so, one of the things I love to think about is, when you think about the world of customer service, right? There's moments when you need to talk to a human. You just need to talk. You just need somebody to understand you and empathize with you. And that's how brands like Zappos originally differentiated themselves, was that customer experience. And for them, it was about some things digital. I think that there is this ability for us to really think about brand and user experiences, and how we can somehow bring it back, these human interactions, which I think we're kind of all craving again, right? I think when you think about just us, I know there's this whole movement about in the work in the office or not in the office, but when we actually get people in the office, they're like, I miss this, right? Because human interactions are critical to us, right? And I think that this has the ability for companies to embrace it, not necessarily as a cost cutting. Now, there will be some benefits to that, don't get me wrong, but they embrace it as a way to give their talent back this time to think about how to actually get to the outer arc. Too many times businesses are stuck on incremental, and then a startup comes in and disrupts them, and either they lose the business due to a startup, or they have to acquire the startup, right? How do you actually let your internal teams become that superpower and help you get to the outer arc?
Yeah. Let's. One of the things I was thinking about was maybe 25 years ago. You always hear people throwing around statistics like, that many of the jobs that existed back then don't exist now anymore at all. I mean, maybe take us 10, 15 years in the future. What is it going to look like then? Are a lot of the jobs that exist now going to be completely, having undergone an evolution and look completely different right by then? I know you don't know the exact answer to that,
Yeah,
obviously,
I
but
mean, I think, I probably think about that a little bit differently. And yes, some of the, you know, some roles will probably end up disappearing. But I think about it as a role of a designer. And when I first started my career, a designer, and
but new roles will come as well along the
new roles
way.
will come as
Isn't
well.
that
But when you think about even just the role of a designer, right? There was always aspects. So like we used to have to cut up files for development. We used to have to redline everything for development. There was always these things, right? And now that's taken care of by tools like Figma. But then out of that, what came up next? Well, we had to create more breakpoints. So there's work that needs to be done there. So if you automate that, there's always new things that come up. And with this technology, there are going to be a lot of new roles. When we look at some of the technology that we're building, you do need humans to review all the work, right? So it is just elevating the staff that we have now to figure out, all right, when our digital coworkers can literally create 5 test scripts in 3 minutes, like how does a human actually keep up with that, right? And so there are new roles and new processes that are going to need to be they're going to come out that are going to be exciting. And I think our job right now is to figure out what that all starts to look like. But if you're not toying around with it, if you're not experimenting with it, if you're not trying, like you're just going to get really far left behind, right? And I think it's just like when cloud came in, just like when the smartphone came in. We're in those eras, right? And for me, like it was just like, how do I go to a company that's embracing that? How do I find someone that's really thinking that this is the next wave, and how do I get on board with that? And I think that's the really exciting way of figuring this out together, right? We don't know. We do know that anything that's repetitive and can is done over and over again is really a great use case for generative AI, but we don't know exactly how those roles are going to shift and the new roles that will be created coming out of this.
so exciting? So exciting. So from a managerial perspective, for managers out there,
Yeah.
taking a look at the different personalities and how they might respond to the integration of AI, where does adaptability and growth mindset fall in? Becoming increasingly crucial in professional development. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really think at this point it's really critical to have that growth mindset and also realize that we are in a maturity curve of the technology, right? So is it 100% to its fullest potential? No. But just like, we went through, there was early adopters of the iPhone and then obviously, some laggards, et cetera. We're going to have that here. But I think the thing that as we're talking to managers, et cetera, it's about learning, right? At this phase, yes, we want ROI, and as a company, we're obviously measuring ROI and figuring out the value of what the technology is bringing. But learning is a critical point of figuring out how you need to evolve, right? We don't have all the answers, right? So the question is, how do you get the answers? Well, you don't get the answers by putting together more PowerPoint presentations.
Yeah.
And that's where so many people get stuck is like, let's put together a PowerPoint presentation. Let's put together this strategy. Well, this technology is moving so fast. By the time you actually have that presentation and get everybody on board with it and be like, oh, let's go implement, you're probably 6 months behind the technology already, right? And so it's how do you learn through action done in a safe way, right? There are risks with this technology that you have to take into consider and making sure that you're working within those, safeties and guardrails as you're learning and experimenting. But, you're not going to get anywhere by staying in a PowerPoint. you have to figure out how can we just start getting the team. For us, that was, let's do some hackathons. Let's show everybody what this technology can do. Let's get people excited about it. Then as they get more excited about it, let's get them training. Let's get them, tools like GitHub Copilot and Microsoft Copilot so they can start, getting more comfortable with it that way. And then let's start to thinking about, well, okay, guys, now we're serious. This is really going to revolutionize the way that we work. And we are actually going to start adding digital coworkers to our teams. And, through that journey over time, right, everybody's getting more and more excited, right? And they're like, well, how can I help develop these coworkers? How can I get this, right? And so it is about, you don't want to take them from, from 0 to 100, right? You have to take them from 0 to 1, and then from 1 to 10, and then from 10 to 20, right? And those incremental steps of taking them through the process, getting them excited, knowing, being transparent that, this is going to have some bumps along the way. It's not fully baked, right? But it is about, learning by doing, not learning by PowerPoint, right?
Yeah. Very good. Very good. So what are some examples of how Provoke Solutions is successfully integrating AI capabilities, how the approach is contributing to creating a more dynamic and human-centric work environment?
Yeah. So, at Provoke, our CEO, Andy, grew up as a developer, right? And so, Andy and I have worked together for a long time. And in the end, I'm all about how do you get these experiences built, right? And he's always educating me on this is much harder than you think, right? And so the real question is, why is this so hard, right? And it comes down to just a whole bunch of stuff that involved in the software development lifecycle that's really tedious, mundane work that has to get done to be able to release quality products, especially products at enterprise level. When we talked about that, there's a ton of technical debt that you have to unravel before you can ever build a new feature and function on top of that. And so, at Provoke, we're really on a mission on how do we change that? How do we get that 42%, of a developer's time back on new feature function, and how do we let generative AI take away that is? And we started with Copilot, GitHub Copilot. It's a great tool. I think we saw about 25 to 30% efficiency within our teams, and we're still using that. Don't get me wrong. But we really see this need to move from Copilot to autopilot with what we're calling digital coworkers. And what we're actually building is, kind of pre-trained digital coworkers. And, I think our most robust one is actually a test engineer who can actually, just simply join our team. So when you think about, we're on a call today, our digital coworker, Nolan is one of them, can actually join and say what he's working on, and report anything that he's blocked by on or couldn't complete. But the really critical thing is that we're not changing the way our teams work. So our digital coworkers just join the same Azure DevOps boards as our teams do. They're assigned tasks and they just work them, right? And so, but the really powerful thing is that Nolan, our test engineer, usually it would take, our test engineers probably, 2 or 3 days to write a test script. Nolan can do that in about 1 or 2 minutes, right? And so, we're just assigning those test scripts to Nolan to do end-to-end testing. He's completing them. Our devs are then reviewing what he does and making sure that those test scripts are up to par. But it's just adding a lot of efficiency. And when you think about it, so you're probably thinking, well, what does this mean for a test engineer and the future of that role, right? Most test engineers, especially if they are a true engineer, want to go into full stack engineering. And so when you get into testing and somebody's been in test engineering for 3 to 5 years, they're looking to get up into full stack engineering versus test engineering. So this just helps accelerate that path, right? Allowing Nova to take on some of those works. But the true differentiator here is that, for a typical test script, it would normally cost probably like around a little over $100 to get that done. With Nolan, our test engineer, you're talking about $3, right? And so, there's that cost savings that, I think is, obviously to a business owner and a CFO, there, that's a pretty big savings. But for our teams, it's how they actually get to work on what they love and not going to a sprint demo, having to explain, well, I didn't get to work on your new features and functions because I was doing all that, right? It's really allowing them to focus on what they love and driving value in the products that they're building that people can see and understand versus always working on untangling all that legacy systems and debt.
Yeah. Well, Jenna, wonderful to have you on today. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end it there, but it's fantastic to talk with you. And tell everyone how they can get into contact with you, whether it's Twitter or one of the other socials.
Yeah. So I'd love for everybody to reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to get in contact with me, either through my personal profile or our Provoke Solutions page. So
Awesome.
great.
Great to have
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thanks for being on From the Ground Up, Jenna.
Thank you so much, Sean.